Welcome to Electric Bike Report. My name's John.
And I'm Griffin.
In this week's episode, we have a ton of news to cover. So we saw a couple of huge releases from Lectric and Aventon.
We are talking some super popular bikes.
That's right. Unfortunately, we also saw some announcements about closures of e-bike and bike-related companies.
Dang it.
And we're also going to respond to some questions from the audience, including, is a premium tier e-bike worth the higher price?
I guess we're going to find out in this week's Weekly Recharge. All right, as always, leading off with our cool finds of the week. Let's see what the team found for us, John.
Yeah, let's take a look.
All right, first thing up, coming to us from the Radavist and some others. Ooh, check
Always
this
good
out.
stuff.
Let's see.
Looks.
Got some custom e-bike action here. Look at that! You get to face your driver as you're going around.
So I don't know about that. I get motion sick. That would. I don't know about that.
True, but you could hold such better conversations. Have you ever been on a tandem bike and you're like trying to shout like to the person behind you and they can't hear you? It's a whole thing.
No, that makes perfect sense. Yeah, definitely.
But I mean,
plus it's also like a little cradle. It's cozy.
Oh, that's true. It does look very cozy. Look at that, just in there amongst traffic and stuff. Pretty cool design. I like it.
Yeah, pretty interesting. Next up from Mundo Silissimo?
Sure.
Something like that.
Oh no. Oh, you dragging.
Ouch. That hurts my soul.
Oh. You know, we have had that happen once, and it's still like one of those things that haunts me. We like shore down like the handlebar. The grip was like that long to start, and then it was like that long towards the end. It was just gone, and someone's like, "Hey, dude, you're dragging." We're like,
at least this person got caught, early on.
It looks like they're still in the parking lot. Didn't get too far.
And it like bounced a couple times instead of like straight up dragging.
Exactly. Yeah. We were like half a mile down the road with ours. I felt so bad. Yes, it was a test bike for those wondering, and yes, it was a very awkward email to send.
Had to get some replacement parts.
Next up, we've got Brompton folding bike, fully loaded Brompton.
Dang,
Look at this thing.
Okay. I didn't know Brompton made cargo bikes.
There is more like stuff than Brompton here.
No joke. Yeah, seriously. They've got to have that like weight capacity maxed out.
You'd think so. What on earth?
At least volume capacity maxed out.
I kind of want to see someone ride with it, see how the weight changes as we're going around there. But still, very impressive.
Very impressive, yeah. Pretty cool.
All right.
From Fianchota?
You get the ones we don't know how to pronounce this week.
It's been consistent the past few weeks. Yeah, I don't know what's going on.
Yeah. They're like tandem biking on a car engine and La Polizia. They are just okay.
I want to know how this turned out.
What are the cops thinking? Like they're just like seeing some guy with a camera too. They're just like, this crap.
Yikes.
I kind of want to know what happened next. Maybe we'll find out next week.
Maybe.
Okay, next up from damngood.bike. I always like a name that's very straightforward.
Yeah, you respect that.
Let's see what we got. Okay.
Ooh. Automatically turning headlight. Yeah,
following.
Okay.
All right.
See, that's the problem with lights that are mounted on the fork. You turn your wheel, but your light still points straight ahead.
Yeah. One of those.
That solves the problem.
That's practical. Just like the cars did that a while back. And I'm like, we need that on bikes too. Get that on all the, small vehicle transportations.
I'm digging it.
Right. Last but not least.
Ovindo Growl.
You really got everyone that we don't know how to pronounce.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
Guys, I'm sorry. This is struggle bus this week. I don't know.
Okay. 2 wheels up front, but then we're popping a wheelie. So
why bother having?
I was gonna say
at that point.
We got 3 wheels, but we're unicycling this thing. Woo.
I mean, impressive, nonetheless.
Look at how that frame hinges over, swings out. I'm just thinking it's not super rideable if you just have to go straight to the back wheel.
Maybe, yeah.
But also kudos, I can't hold a wheelie that long, and by that long, I mean more than like a second.
Yeah, likewise without face planting.
Wait, I said last but not least, but I think we got one more.
One more,
kidding.
okay.
TPT cycling.
The
I get
easy
the ones
one.
that we can actually say.
Mm-hmm.
Pong!
On a e-bike display, what?
Pong! That's what I'm talking about.
All right,
more games?
e-bike brands, take note. We want this.
Just to program something in there that you can't do it while the bike's moving. But if you stop and park, by all means, enjoy some Pong. Did you have the graphing calculator in high school that would have the games on it? And you were just like, don't mind me, just doing sine, cosine, and tangent while you're like, 100% playing Snake or whatever.
Yeah.
100%.
Galaga, yeah.
Yeah, same vibe, same energy. I love it. Okay. Thanks to the team for this week's finds. All right, so the big news for this week is actually a couple of bike launches, which we have covered on the channel. So we're kind of doing the recent reviews section a little bit early, but again, the Lectric XP4 came out. It is the #1 selling e-bike in America. And the Aventon Aventure 3 came out as well, which is the #1 selling fat tire e-bike in America. So when I say that they are big deals, they're seriously big deals, and we were able to get some reviews up. So make sure to check those out if you haven't already.
Definitely. We'll talk a little bit more about that stuff later on. But moving on to more formal news stories. So one big one here, and apologies in advance, this is going to get a little bit technical, but I'll kind of break things down. So the CPSC, which is the Consumer Product Safety Commission, voted to advance a proposal that basically is all about stricter testing requirements on e-bikes and their batteries. So, right now, there are some cities in the US, like New York City, that have pretty strict requirements on what bikes and batteries can be sold there. And in particular, they have to be UL certified, but that doesn't apply to all places in the US. That's, just a few cities here and there. So here in the US with the UL certification, we have two standards that are UL 2271 and UL 2849. 2271 covers a battery, and the 2849 covers the entire bike's electrical system. So across the pond over in Europe, they have some different standards. Those are the EN 15194 and EN 17128. So there's some similarities there. They cover electrical systems as well, but there's also a little bit more technical things like structural integrity, construction, durability, braking performance, speed, and range estimation. So it's a little bit more of a blanket thing. So basically, the CPSC is, concerned about the publicized e-bike battery fire situation, which, as we've covered, is potentially a little bit overblown by the media, but they're kind of pushing to ignore EN standards and push for some better refinement of the UL certification standards. And if the bill passes, then anything that is not UL certified would be unable to be sold in the US. So in kind of ignoring or not recognizing the EN standards, basically their problems were with those. With the EN 15194, they said that one only covers class 1 and 3 e-bikes, whereas the majority of things here in the US are class 2. And then that standard also doesn't include flammability requirements. So I'll pull a quote from the article here with a little bit more detail about that. So the commission considers the flammability requirements in UL 2849-20 critical for fire safety because they help to deter the spread of fire during a thermal runaway event by requiring that the polymeric material extinguish within a specific maximum amount of time as to limit or slow down fire propagation. So again, just preventing the spread of fire there. And then kind of their issue with the EN 17128 is that it focuses more on off-road micro-mobility devices. And they basically said that the safety performance requirements for electrical systems of the covered products are not as comprehensive as those in UL 2272, which is interesting because that actually applies to scooters, not e-bikes here. But the refinements that they want to make to the UL standards that we have here, they want tamper-resistant battery packs. They also want battery management systems that prohibit charging if the battery cells inside the battery pack get too hot. And they also want systems in place that prevent damage to the batteries when using a charger that is not compatible with that pack. So there's if this passes, that could be a little bit of a problem for brands that have a lot of existing inventory, as those things wouldn't be able to be sold. So, right now we're kind of in a period where it is open for public comment. So, if you feel one way or the other about this, feel free to add your voice to the mix there. We'll leave some links in the video description where you can do that, and we'll keep you updated as this progresses. But depending on the feedback, the next step for this proposal would be going to Congress, and then if it gets passed, then then those things would not be able to be sold. So hopefully that covered everything.
I was like, that was a lot in there, but yeah, it'll be interesting to see how everything unwinds. Kind of like John said, other lobbyist groups who might speak up during this comment period and stuff. We'll kind of get more information and see where things progress from there. But yeah, a lot of news on the UL front. So
definitely.
And then speaking of safety things, so Santa Cruz actually recalled some Heckler 9 e-bikes that were potential fire hazards. Kind of sounds like a bad batch of batteries. So only some bikes are affected, and those that were manufactured before February 2023 that contain lithium-ion batteries. So the bikes that were sold essentially from February 2022 to February 2025. As part of the announcement, Santa Cruz said its affected Heckler 9 e-bikes come with an interchangeable 720 watt-hour TWR battery that sits inside a black case under the frame. Santa Cruz is printed on the sides of the down tube of the bicycle frame, and Heckler is printed on the top tube of the frame and on the side of the left chainstay. The e-bikes in which the affected products may be installed were sold in gloss avocado green and maritime gray. So this is a voluntary recall, but Santa Cruz says to stop using your bike immediately and disconnect the battery. So check the serial number with the battery serial number checker on their website. And then just a reminder, bad battery does not mean go throw it away. That's not the solution that they're after here. So, if your battery is affected, contact them through the form online or via the phone to, dispose of them properly according to local requirements. Again, don't just throw it away. That's a potential fire hazard. So, again, always good to see like a brand just responding quickly. And if, you are riding one of those bikes, make sure to take the proper steps.
Absolutely. And again, links down there where you can check out the tool and that sort of thing.
Yep, we'll include those in the notes.
Next story comes to us about the parent company of two pretty reputable brands, GasGas and Husqvarna. So they are withdrawing from the e-bike market. So that parent company is Pure Mobility Group, and they're selling off their remaining inventory of bikes from those two brands. They also have a 70% stake in the Felt bicycle brand, and they're kind of evaluating how to go about that separately. They're in a restructuring phase right now. They had some pretty big losses in their motorcycle division last year, and they're trying to secure some financing for a pretty giant chunk of cash, $678 million, to be able to sort of stabilize all of that. So they had another bike brand called Raymond that they sold off, and because of that, their sales dropped by 34%. In 2023, they sold 156,000 units or so, and just last year that dropped down to 103,000. So pretty big chunk there. And they're currently consolidating their bases in California and Austria, as they are also expecting record losses this year. So.
I was a tough year for a lot of different folks in the e-bike industry. So, unfortunately, it's been a headline we've reported on a lot.
They're at least status quo at this point, unfortunately.
However, there are some brands who are in the cycling space that are actually looking to get a start.
Yes, and innovating too.
Indeed. So this next one is the Vabs Rider, which is launching a Kickstarter campaign. So we actually did a story on this about a year or so ago, I believe, and it's just one of the more interesting bike saddles I've ever seen. So it's almost kind of, the best way to describe it, it's kind of like an elliptical bike seat. So it's an elliptical for your butt, folks.
Yep,
yes,
that's right.
Correct. You heard me describe it that way. So it's designed to be ergonomic, and it moves with your body, which is going to help eliminate any pain on sensitive areas. So it's going to support your femur instead of your sit bones, and there's clearly interest in it too, because they actually started with just a $10,000 goal on their Kickstarter campaign. As we're filming this right now, it's up to $127,000. So again, lots of demand there. There is going to be a couple more weeks by the time this airs that you'll have the opportunity to go and invest if you want to. It is a pricey device for sure. It's $650 for a single saddle. So again, a little bit pricier, but if it can deliver on some of the promises for a little bit more relaxed and helping riders who might have had to get out of the saddle due to some pain, if it can kind of eliminate that, it could be worth the investment of the right cyclist. So interesting to see where that one goes.
Yeah, we actually had quite a bit of interest on the article that we published about that. So it seems like there was definitely some curiosity out there. But moving on to our next story, a U.S.-based manufacturer of drivetrain components called Rotor America, which is actually a subsidiary of a Spanish company. They are closing their doors due to the tariff situation. They've been in business for 10 years. They make drivetrain components like crank arms, group sets, that sort of thing. And they're closing, quote, due to ongoing tariff insecurity. So if you place an order, if you have a bike shop that orders through them, you can place orders through June 15th, but anything after that is going to be filled by their Madrid warehouse. And, this is, to me, something that I really wanted to include here, because we are told as consumers that tariffs are to encourage US-based manufacturing and to allow that to grow. And this is a great case of that not actually being the case. We saw some other brands that are going to stop production because they import a lot of their pieces and parts from China. It's just kind of a bigger picture thing here.
Import from China, sometimes just the raw materials are being tariffed in various places too. So yeah, it's unfortunately doesn't look like, quite the boon for them as you would expect.
That's right.
It is what it is, I suppose.
Unfortunate.
And then our last bit of news. So this is something we covered on the website. We want to give it a shout out in the show as well. So Bosch debuted their new edition CXR. It's their race motor. And then they announced an OTA update that will be coming out this summer for existing Gen 5 CX motors. So with the new CX motor, it is a little bit lighter, just 100 grams lighter, but made of some different materials. You got like a titanium parts in there and some ceramic bearings instead, a little bit less friction, so a little bit better durability. But it's also going to get 2 exclusive modes. So it'll have a race mode where it is just like essentially full throttle, all power, and then Bosch already uses an EMTB mode for all of their bikes, which is kind of like the adaptive, gives you the whole spectrum of speed. But it'll have an EMTB Plus, which is kind of like a similar idea, but a little bit more on the powerful and aggressive side. So that'll be exclusive to the race motor. But existing Gen 5 CX motors are going to be getting a power upgrade. So this is kind of cool. Via an OTA update that's supposed to hit in July. Currently, those motors peak at 600 watts. They're going to be upping that to 750. And right now, the torque is 85 Newton meters, but is going all the way up to 100. So they're joining the Century Club there. Again, this, there's clearly been a lot of demand for that. DJI really, shook up the industry when they came out with theirs. We saw the Specialized motor go up to 111 Newton meters of torque, lots of power there. So, we're kind of in the power wars, and, Bosch is responding in kind. So really interested to see kind of how that translates on a Bosch motor specifically. Can't wait to get the chance to ride it. Along with that, though, they did also announce an update. So the Kiox 400C top tube display, which I actually saw at our local sporting goods store just yesterday on a Trek bike, looks really nice. So this mounts really flush. It's, I believe it's an OLED display. It's color. It's got a USB-C charging port. A bunch of newer bikes that came out this fall. They've been including just the LED light bar, kind of like more basic display in the top tube. However, you can upgrade and swap that out in favor of this new color display. So again, Bosch just got a lot in the works and really interested to kind of see how it all goes.
It's kind of mind-blowing to me that you can just up the motor power with an OTA update. Like, that's very cool.
I was going to say, it sounds like it was overbuilt for this inevitability, and that's really awesome that, you can just kind of push that through and then boom, more power.
Done, yeah.
I'm all for it, yeah.
For sure. We think a lot of people out there will be, but that does it for this week's news. I suddenly feel safer. Do you feel safer, Griffin?
Always.
Good.
Actually, I'm feeling the burn a little bit.
You're feeling the burn?
I'm feeling the burn a little bit.
That's right on, because we're wearing some burn helmets. These are some products that we've gotten in. Actually, we've had these for about a year and we've been testing them. We've been using them for some photos and things like that. But Burn makes some really good products. They sent us these to try out and review. So this is the Hudson and this is the Major. No, actually, I have that backwards. I was wearing that before we started filming. We swapped. But in any case, these are some very cool helmets. They've got the MIPS system to cushion your impact a little bit more. Both helmets here have 5-star safety ratings from the Virginia Tech Helmet Lab, which is kind of like the authority for helmet standards. We've found that they're a little bit sized a bit large. So if you are looking at a helmet, we do recommend these, but maybe size down a little bit. That might be a good option there. But they've got some other cool features. They're compatible with a winter liner, and then they come with these cool removable visors. So you can swap those out to wash them when they get kind of gross and nasty. But you can flip those up. They do a good job of keeping the sun out of your eyes. And if you don't like it, you just do that. Piece of cake.
And like any good helmet's got the little, dial adjuster in the back. Make sure it fits securely on your dome. Good amount of ventilation ports on here as well. It's Utah summers. You're going to sweat in literally any helmet that you put on. But as far as that standard goes, I actually feel like you get a good amount of breeze in there, which is really nice. And I like this, we got the high vis color just because if you're doing any night riding, I like to be as visible as possible. So white here, but this high vis one, good option.
They have a lot of color options.
Like they did have a bunch of different color options. It just makes some pretty good stuff. So, overall, they're really nice. Again, this is our non-sponsored gear section, but this is just some stuff we actually use a lot behind the scenes. These are favorites of our crew, our camera crew. So definitely go check them out if you're looking into new helmets.
That's right.
All right, John, now let's go ahead and give people a little peek behind the scenes as to what we've got in the works. So we did get a couple of rad bikes in. We got the Rad Runner and the Rad Runner Max. So the new base model Rad Runner and the highest form. There's also one in the middle there with the Rad Runner Plus. But we talked about this last week. These bikes got a lot of good quality of life feature upgrades and improvements. Some new, new screens and stuff. We really, really like the paint job on both bikes. That was, I think, our first takeaway once we unboxed them.
Totally. The green metallic flake on the Rad Runner Max is primo.
I was gonna say they look really, really nice. So we are doing some range testing on those right now. We'll dive more into those. Probably have the review up in a week or two for you. But in the meantime, as we hinted before, we did have some big reviews go live.
That's right. Starting off with the Aventon Aventure 3. Just, we've covered all the new stuff from Aventon as they've been releasing throughout the year and actually toward the end of last year with the Abound SR. But this, got the same treatment, so a redesigned frame with the gravity casting method. Nice clean look. Some tweaks to the geometry and riding position as well.
Yep.
There's also some changes to the pedal assist system, just a simplified setup that's now customizable through the app, as well as just feeling really dialed in, responsive, and natural. But then, of course, it also has the ACU module. So, of course, that has the integrated 4G chip that gives you a motion detection system, an alarm system. There's geofencing. There's a wheel lock, the ejectable battery, just all kinds of cool premium stuff on there that we don't normally see on a bike that costs around $2,000 or less in some of the other event cases.
100%. There's really good refinements across the board on that one. Not to mention, like, the ACU is really cool. If you're not a like day in, day out cyclist, I think the features are just cool and kind of like worth bragging about in general.
Yeah.
But if you are the type of person who you're like on a bike most of the week or something like that, that feel like crucial accessories if you're really committing to like, the micro EV lifestyle and biking everywhere. That is some really good security features on there.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, we saw a lot of those similar things on the Specialized Turbo Vado SL2 Carbon that we reviewed, which was, 3 times the price. So
Yeah.
it's like kind of wild.
Yeah.
But then anyway, moving on to the big ones from Lectric. So we had the 2 different models of the XP4, which is their sort of flagship folding e-bike. So I reviewed the 500 watt version with the ST frame. It comes in both high step and step through, but we had a high step on the 750 that you did.
Right.
But just so many upgrades there as well. It kind of mind blowing. They did a redesign of the frame, some tweaks to the geometry as well. Just feels awesome to ride. There's a torque sensor now. There's turn signals. There's a new display with a custom user interface. Just all the trim stuff feels upgraded. It's a huge leap forward for that bike.
Agreed, yeah.
And yet it still is priced, the base model anyway, at $999, which in a time where we're seeing all the tariffs and everything.
Absolutely insane. Like if ever they were justified in finally raising the price of, the $999 e-bike, it would have been now, but they held the line despite making a bike that's better across the board.
But yeah, like the price would have been totally worthwhile a year ago. So now it's just even a better value overall.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, in addition to the 500 watt though, this time around Lectric is giving people options for some serious upgrades in the form of a more powerful motor and extra battery. So there's a XP 750 watt now, so 50% more motor and like 67 or 68% more battery on board.
That's impressive.
A couple other nice features on there, like a suspension seat post and upgraded headlight too, just for $300 more, so $1,299 total. Definitely packs a punch. You can feel the difference from either bike. I mean, the 500 watt is punchy in its own right, but you definitely know you're getting what you're paying for on the other one.
That kicks, yeah.
100%. So, I mean, we've got in-depth reviews on both of those bikes. We also threw up a quick comparison of the XP3 to the base model XP4. So if you want to see all the upgrades, kind of like John said, everything got an aesthetic and or spec bump, like literally like every square inch of that bike. It's kind of nuts. So go check those videos out if you haven't. But that's going to do it for our recap on what we got in the works here at Electric Bikeport.
All right, one of the big segments of the show here is where we take a look at a different place around the country and sometimes the world, a place that has a cool trail system, something related to e-bikes. And, we bounced around a lot around the U.S. recently. We're finally kind of coming back to our home state for this one.
For me, I'm really going home because this one actually touches the county in which I was born and lived for most of my life. So this week we're taking a look at the Jordan River Parkway trail system. Again, this is a nice little stretch that gives you great, vantage point of all the popular places along northern Utah, I'd say. So it is a 45-mile trail that extends from Utah Lake in Utah County to the Great Salt Lake in Davis County, where I am from. It is a paved riding thing that just kind of goes along the Jordan River for a lot of it, but it's really easy trail too. It's all paved, so easy to moderate sections is how it's described, but for e-bikers, that's all easy. It does allow e-bikes on there, class 1, so 20 mile per hour limited speeds. It does discourage throttle use. It encourages people to treat e-bikes like regular bikes and move those pedals a little bit. You can do it really any time of year. Winters can be kind of brutal in Utah, so I personally maybe would skip out on that. However, the other 3 seasons are pretty good. It also gets a little bit warm in the summer as well. It's Utah, folks. This is a desert. We feel the extremes. So maybe like get riding in earlier if you can before it gets hot, but really just some really awesome stuff to see. I'm always a huge fan of kind of like passing through different types of, environments and terrain. I love feeling that kind of shift. There's some really cool trees. You can find some like willow and cottonwood trees. You can also ride up like through some wetlands as well and get into like the cattails and bulrushes and stuff like that. Just tons of different shrubs, grasses, things to see. And then for people who are fans of wildlife, especially the bird watchers out there are so many birds in northern Utah. It's kind of nuts. Jotted down a few of them that I could find online because I don't know the names of them. I can tell you, hey, look, that's a different bird than the last bird.
There's also some crazy bird names out there.
There are some crazy bird names out there.
We got to be careful what we say.
There is just, it's kind of like a side tangent, but like I actually went down that rabbit hole just like a week ago, and it's like there is no regulation on bird names, and here's like a bunch of like ridiculous ones I can't even say right here on the show. So anyway, some of the birds that you can kind of find: a red-tailed hawk, great blue heron. Heron. Yeah. Heron. Okay, well, heron, fine. I'll go with
Hurrah.
Hurrah, that's right. Different types of geese: barn swallows, red-winged blackbird, American robin, and then for ground-bound animals, foxes, squirrels, mule deer, and actually going back airborne really quickly, some butterflies as well. Those were my grandma's favorites, so I'm all about the different types of butterflies.
Good.
So tons of points of interest to stop and check out too. As this does kind of run you through Salt Lake City itself, there is the International Peace Gardens, which is really kind of a cool area. It's a bunch of like different divided up sections, kind of like Epcot. If you've ever been there, you got like all the different countries or whatever. It's kind of like a garden, but like every garden is a different country. So a really cool place to check out. There's also like a redwood nature area, a 50-acre natural area with restored wetlands. And then just, again, Salt Lake City itself is just a really cool place that I like a lot. They've got a really awesome food scene. You can find, different types of sushi. You can find like French areas. You can find just like some barbecue, some sandwiches. They got a little bit of everything if you're kind of willing to venture into town. And, cool museums and stuff to check out. I know you're a big museum guy.
Man.
Have you actually gone through the Salt Lake ones yet?
No, so I've literally only been to Salt Lake for a day. I had like a real quick turnaround for a business trip. I flew in like midday and left that evening. So I had zero time. I saw Home Depot and some highways. That was
You saw Home Depot in Salt Lake City.
Yeah.
I'm just going to go ahead and encourage John to go back. We have Memorial Day coming up.
I would love to see more of,
take advantage to go spend some time there. But
especially
anyway,
taking a look at the photos here. I mean, there's some we live in Utah, so beautiful mountain
I was like,
views,
the mountains, hard to beat those views.
Goodness gracious, yeah. Very cool stuff. So, thanks for the tour.
Some awesome stuff. Again, very much in love with the place that I grew up, Davis County, near and dear to my heart, always will be. And just awesome stuff. So if you're ever passing through Utah, maybe go take a look at the Jordan River Parkway trail system.
And then let us know if you have anything in your backyard that you want us to talk about on the show. All right, now it's time for one of our favorite parts of the show where we get into all the questions and comments that have shown up over the course of the past couple weeks.
Courtesy of you, the people.
That's right. We appreciate everything that you share with us. So the first question here comes to us from Yogi Yoda. I love that name so much.
I want to see the cross of that in cartoon form. Yogi the Bear meets Yoda.
Seems like another...
I'm going to ask AI to make that.
That's what I was just going to say. Yeah, for sure. This came to us from the Trek FX Plus 7 review on YouTube. Yogi Yoda says, seems like a nice bike, but someone can get an analog Trek FX for $500 and a more powerful commuter e-bike for less than $1,000. Don't understand the market for this at $4,400. Is this really worth over $3,000? Wow. Really worth over $3,000 more than the previously mentioned combo? Or just getting an Aventon Solterra or Velotric T1 ST Plus. And then we had kind of a follow-up to that said, from Wisco Colby, you may as well grab the previous Trek FX Plus versus the Solterra for sure. This probably isn't worth over $3K though, so your point holds. And then someone else added, this is from EDS70344, I love my Velotric ST, got at $1,000. Definitely don't see a bike like this justified at a $4,000 plus price. What do you have to say about that?
So I'll jump into that because I was the one that reviewed that bike. So first of all, I kind of understand that when people see the sticker value of these different things. I think the temptation is just to assume if this one costs $4,000 and this one costs $2,000, is the $4,000 one giving me 2 times everything? Am I getting 2 times the bike, 2 times the features, 2 times the quality? And more often than not, like, I'm not even talking bikes, man. I'm just talking like in general. That's rarely the case. You're not getting necessarily that much more, right?
It's little refinements. Yeah.
It's some of those little refinements, but they really are the types of things that are hard to execute, or just like even going beyond the refinement. Sometimes it's just going with the brand. Sometimes it's going with the legacy, the name. It's going with the R&D of one of the biggest cycling companies in the world, like things like that. It's all kind of like baked into what you're getting. And again, sometimes like even if like I would say like, this might be 10, 20% more quality, however I define that, of ride, it's a little bit smoother, a little bit nicer by 10 or 20%. That 10 to 20% is sometimes a chasm to actually like pull off and execute. It does not sound like much more, but it is so much actually harder to like, figure it out. That's why like not everyone gets like straight A's in high school, right? That's like, it's hard to consistently get 95 or higher and get the A, as opposed to occasionally dip it down below like 93% and get an A-. So with that in mind, kind of like bringing it back to the bikes specifically themselves, the FX Plus really is just definitely one of those things that's in the top tier when it comes to just all of the like cycling mechanics that lead to a good ride. Now that is not to disparage those other bikes that were mentioned on there, because as it turns out, we actually really like the Aventon Solterra. We really like the Velotric bikes. Yeah. And I wouldn't look down on anyone who chooses to go with something that's a little bit like more value, a little more bang for the buck. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, while I wouldn't look down on that crowd, I wouldn't look down on the crowd either that wants to spend $4,000 for something a little bit like more dialed in. Again, some differences are so apparent. If you're sleeping on a rock and then you go to sleeping on a mattress, that's a obvious noticeable difference. And then sometimes you're talking the quality of the mattress, the softness, the firmness. Maybe you don't even notice it up front, but you notice it down the line in terms of your sleep. It's kind of the same thing with cyclists. The Trek FX Plus is the Plus 7 to be specific, is the type of bike that people would absolutely love if they've been a long-time cyclist now who's looking to transition into electric bikes. Because it is just, that TQ motor on that thing was just the most like realistic sensation I've ever had, while clearly boosting my efforts.
Totally.
And so, I mean, that's like that going pretty far for me to say, but like seriously, it was just that good and that dialed. The rest of the bike was great too. And then again, you're getting the Trek ecosystem, some of the support, some of the coverage, all that stuff that goes with it. And to be fair, it's $4,400 now because they did raise prices 10% because of tariff stuff. It was $4,000 before, but going back to the other bikes again, like those are all really great bikes. There's probably going to be more of those bikes sold than of this one, like no doubt, because they're just a little bit more broad and common appeal, because it's kind of the every person bike. You can appreciate it if you are like someone who's been cycling for a while. You can appreciate it if you know nothing about e-bikes. But again, my saying I always like to go with, different strokes for different folks. Some people are willing to kind of like pay that premium price, and if that's within their budget and that's what they want to do, great. If you want to be that person who gets the value option, also great.
Yeah, just kind of on that note, and a little teaser for later on, we had someone that we are going to highlight in the Rider of the Week section who, was the kind of person that really appreciates all of those refinements and that sort of premium tier. So it's just kind of interesting to see, where everyone puts their priorities and their budget and that sort of thing. But,
yeah, 100%. Or one more metaphor or analogy, I guess. I'm fine spending like $1,000 to go to Mexico. I haven't been to Hawaii because everything look at Hawaii, it's like $2,000 or $3,000. I'm like, I mean, I can get good beaches in Mexico. I can get good food in Mexico, but everyone like who's done both, most people are like, Hawaii like a little bit better. I was like, I'm not at that stage yet. Sometimes I will pay the Hawaii price versus Mexico price, but again, it's just kind of like different experiences, different priorities for everyone. So
yeah, makes sense.
All right, so then next up, this comes to us from Bernie Mittens, which I hope that's a reference to Bernie Sanders when he had his like mitten meme going around. Anyway, how would you compare this to the Velotric Discover 2? This is talking about the Velotric Breeze 1 review. So.
Yeah, and that's an excellent question considering that those are both Velotric bikes. They share a lot in common. They have a lot of same features like, integrated brake lights and turn signals, the different riding modes with a ton of different power levels, the ability to switch between torque and cadence sensing modes. So really if I'm summarizing here, and this is really simplifying, but the Discover 2...
Oh, Siri talking to you. Hey, good, carry on.
Yeah. In any case, I don't know why Siri's listening to me, but yeah. So the Discover 2 boiled down is just bigger, it's sturdier, it's a little bit more relaxed in its handling, and the Breeze is lighter, nimbler, and a little peppier just because of its lower weight. On the performance side of things, the Discover gave us a little bit more range, and that makes sense because it has a bit of a larger battery. The Breeze had a little bit of braking performance, which makes sense because it's lighter. And then the Discover climbed our test hill significantly faster in its throttle test result, but then the Breeze won by a handful of seconds in the pedal test. So pretty similar climbing performance overall. Comfort-wise, both bikes are very comfortable, but I think the Discover has a little bit of an edge there just because it has a larger, cushier saddle and then the front suspension. And similar riding positions as well, just very upright and relaxed with the cruiser styling there. So at the time of filming, There's a price difference of about $200 between the two bikes. That was only actually about $100 when we reviewed it. And, the $200 feels about right, I think, just with the upgrades that you get on the Discover. You've got fenders, you've got the cargo rack, the larger battery, all that sort of thing. So, bottom line, we would kind of recommend the Breeze to someone if you are moving your bike around a lot. You want something that's a little bit lighter, something that's a little bit zippier, and really crisp handling. And then if you want something that's maybe a little bit more luxurious feeling, that still handles really well and has plenty of power, then we would steer you towards the Discover 2.
Well said.
And then the next question here comes to us from the Lectric XP4 750 review that was on YouTube from Anime Janai 4657. When folding this bike and laying it down on its side in a sedan trunk, is there a preferable side to lay it down? Should it be laid down on the derailleur side or the other side?
Great question. In general, always recommend not laying it down on the derailleur side. So this particular bike, I believe it's got that bash cage that is over the derailleur. However, in good practice, good rule of thumb, if you bend that derailleur, it's just not something a lot of people are going to be able to fix themselves, and you might have to go get replaced. There is a tool that can kind of help straighten it out. But again, for the average person, just not a fix you're probably going to want to take on. So I always prefer to lay things down on the non-drive side just to be safe. So general advice to go with.
I think that's good. I, kind of recently got a little better at tuning derailleurs, and it's a process that I've struggled a little bit, learning how to do that. And
to get bent in such a way, it's not an easy thing to get them back. So
if you're not familiar with that process, then just from personal experience, I'd say you probably don't want to get into that. So the more you can protect your derailleur, the better.
Absolutely. All right. So for our next question, also from the XP4 750 review, it says, this is from DJ Wolf 7280. Love that you guys use the Grand Canyon for your opening backdrop. Flaunt that natural beauty. It's not bragging.
That's right.
Agreed. Grand Canyon. Definitely highly recommend.
If you've never been, it's something else.
I was going to say, it lives up to the hype. So two questions. Number one, how do you think it would fit a 5'11" person with a 31.5" inseam? Would it fit atop the step through? I ask because electric size guidelines are dubious and vague with the same recommendations for both high step and step through. Fit matters, bike friends. The videos of Griffin's 6'3", actually 6'1", body atop the step through shows good leg extension, but some clips seem like a cramped looking fit on his arms with too much elbow bend. Other clips do not look quite as bad, so hard to be sure. And then question number two, am I the only one peeved that Lectric often reserves white and high visibility colored frames for their step through? I considered a couple of their bikes in the past, but black is not something I want when riding a bike on downtown urban streets. As soon as this review went live, I looked, and once again, the white and raindrop blue XP4 colors are reserved for the step through. High step is black and a muted pine green. Sigh. That's an automatic deal breaker for me for my urban bikes. Making sure cars can see me as a top priority. I want an easy to see frame, reflective sidewall tires, and pair that with a brightly colored helmet. Kind of like the ones we showed earlier from Bird.
That's right.
So let's see. Come on, Lectric. Not everyone wants to wear high vis clothing whenever they ride their bikes. Please offer some more for your high step frames in white or other bright colors. So longer comment on that one. But John, how do we kind of respond for this person?
Yeah, I structured this to jump in here, even though Griffin reviewed the 750 that this comment was on. I personally fit those height guidelines that this person was asking about. I'm 5'11". My inseam is about 31 inches versus 31 and a half, so very slim difference there. And then again, I reviewed the ST model with the 500 watt motor, but that doesn't really matter in this case. Just as far as fit goes, I commented in my review that the fit felt awesome. The XP 3.0, the geometry there was, not quite as refined. So the reach in particular, I was just really far stretched out and not the most comfortable to ride for me personally. But this version of the bike, just the angle of the stem is better. It actually changes the reach a little bit as the handlebar height changes as well. But I had a very comfortable bend at the elbow. I wasn't all stretched out or cramped at all. And then there's a nice long seat post on both versions of the bike, and leg extension was great there. So yeah, hopefully that helps. If you're similar in me to proportions, then I'd say go for it. It's going to be awesome, based on my personal experience. And then going to that second point about colors and stuff. So, Lectric being sort of a budget brand, they are able to offer low prices, and many brands are able to do this similarly by kind of sticking to a smaller selection of colors. With fewer color options, you don't have to reserve as much storage space for inventory, and that allows you to pass on cost savings to the customer. Typically speaking, they've historically offered bikes in black and white. So we actually were really happy to see them branch out a little bit more here, and that those the Raindrop Blue and Pine Green are on the 750, so not the 500.
And just also one note on colors in general. So Lectric actually had a live stream event for the XP4, which I did watch. Interestingly enough, the CEO, Levi, he actually did bring up colors a little bit. And he's like, when we had that media day, that's where you saw us at the Grand Canyon. They invited a bunch of different media there to go check out the bikes. Then we, of course, brought them back and tested them here. He said we were kind of shocked to hear everyone talk about the blue and the green, and we didn't realize people wanted color that much. We thought white and black were great, so we underestimated that a little bit, and we're going to get more color options in stock. I'm not promising that's going to be on every different model is going to have access to all 4 different colors, but it does sound like they at least kind of acknowledged there's greater demand for color than they anticipated, and they talked about ramping that up. So fingers crossed it does become more widely available on the 2 different bikes that they have.
That's really cool. Yeah, I was not at that event, so I didn't get that insight. Thank you for adding that.
Good thing.
With that, hopefully we'll see what happens there. But if you are concerned about visibility, there are a few things that I would recommend with especially this version of the bike. So the user interface through the display there is, again, a very nice feature of this bike. We really liked seeing the custom UI there, but there's a couple different options for how the lights function within the display. So the standard mode is that the lights are off until you activate them, and then they are on, solidly. But the other mode is that as long as the bike is on, the lights will flash. So that should definitely help out with nighttime visibility if you switch to that mode. As you mentioned, the reflective tires. So the XP4 does not have tires with a reflective sidewall, but Lectric said that they were inspired with their custom tire on this version of the bike by specialized carless Whisper tires that are on the Globe Hall models. And those do have a reflective sidewall, so you could switch those and kind of still have the same spirit of the bike since, that inspired Lectric. And we really like those tires. They have great traction and stability overall. And then you might also consider adding some reflective tape or stickers. This isn't something that we've really played around with here, but I just kind of glancing around the internet, there's a company called Ride Safe, which is RYDE Safe, that makes some really cool looking stuff, very high visibility. If anybody from Ride Safe is watching, send us your stuff. We'd love to try it out and talk a little bit more about it. But, that's definitely some options in case you don't have anything working out there as far as colors based on what you like. But anyway, moving on to our last question of the day. This is going to be a big one. This is from the Aventon Aventure 3 review that I did. This is EMA or EMA 102207T. That's a mouthful. I am currently looking into the Heybike Alpha. How will it perform compared to this new Adventure? The price looks relatively high.
Okay, fair point. So first of all, let's start with the Alpha. That was a review that I did, and I was actually pleasantly surprised with the Alpha in a lot of different regards. It's a very uncommon mix of being affordable, fat tires, mid-drive. It's also got a step-through option. These are just not things we typically see. And the mid-drive on that was great in e-vice. We were seeing more and more of their motors across all sorts of different e-bikes, and we're just continuously impressed with them. So it was a really nice ride. We'll do a little bit of a deep dive into the specs and kind of compare everything. This will be our comparison of the week. Let's acknowledge some of the similarities that the two have, and then we'll kind of go into some of their differences later on. But so they're both fat bikes with a 26 by 4 inch knobby tires. You have high step and step through options on both. Both come in aluminum frames. They have hydraulic brakes with 2 piston calipers and 180 millimeter rotors, suspension forks with 80 mil of travel and throttles. Bluetooth connectivity and smartphone apps. It's a little bit limited on the Heybike one, if I'm being honest. I didn't really use it much, but it technically is there. So room for improvement on the app down the line. And then integrated lights and turn signals, cargo racks, payload capacity is 400 pounds, and both are fully UL certified. And now from there, that's all the overlap. But then they kind of start to branch out a little bit.
Yeah.
So John will
handle
give the Adventure 3. I'll let him
yeah.
take that one, and I'll kind of give you all the specifics on the Alpha. So let's go ahead and start with the Adventure, though, Don.
Yeah, diving in a little bit deeper here on the motor side of things, the Adventure 3 has a 750 watt rear hub that peaks at 1,188 watts and has 80 newton meters of torque. And then the bike ships as a Class 2, but it can switch to a Class 3.
And then over on the Alpha side of things, that's a 500 watt mid drive, which is also uncommon, pretty powerful for a mid drive. I'm not entirely sure about the peak. Got to get more information from them on that, but it does have 105 Newton meters of torque. It is class 2 and 3, though we did find that the throttle is not all that powerful on that one. It's a little bit finicky in some regards, but it is there, kind of almost like a cruise control function once you get up and pedaling.
Yep, for sure. Moving on to the battery, the Aventure 3 has a 36 volt, 703 watt hour battery.
Whereas the Alpha does a 680 watt hour battery. So, the different motor types may nullify some of the capacity difference there, but, we'll talk more later when we talk about their range that we got in the testing.
Looking a little bit deeper at the brake systems, again, very similar specs, but the Aventure has the Tektro HD E3520 system.
And then the Alpha had unbranded brakes, but the brake lever body does look very Tektro-ish to me. Again, performance come later, but we both are pretty good, all things considered.
Yep. On the tire side of things, again, very similar, but the Aventure 3 has tires by Innova. They have puncture protection.
And puncture protection as well on the Alpha from WD, which is short. I can't remember the full name, but WD 26x4 inch tires there as well.
Right on. Suspension. The Aventure suspension is made by Zoom. It has 80 millimeters of travel.
And then the Alpha's is unbranded, also 80 mil travel, so very similar-ish.
Yep. On the weight side of things, we weighed the Aventure 3. The high step was 78 pounds, including the battery.
And then the Alpha, one of its, again, uncommon traits, is a little bit lighter weight at 71 pounds. That is on the lower end of the spectrum for fat tire bikes. So Aventure a little bit more steady and sturdy, whereas the Alpha a little bit more light and nimble.
I will say that, handling-wise, the Aventure is still pretty surprisingly nimble for a fat bike, though.
I'd agree with that 100%.
The recommended height range, though, for the Aventure is 5'3" to 6'4".
And then we pegged the Alpha around like 5'6" to 6'2".
They didn't actually list that one.
Yeah.
But kind of the diving into the extras. So this is one area where the bikes do really differ a lot. The Aventure, of course, has the ACU module that we talked about, the 4G chip, the alarm system, wheel lock, LCD display, small front light, there's rear turn signals, and then just a super functional app that lets you, gives you access to all those security features, and then also lets you tune the motor output.
And then over on the Alpha side of things, so it's got a larger platform on the cargo rack. It does have front and rear turn signals, and the app is Christmas themed. So if you like Christmas, it's Christmas all year round. Doesn't look like they've updated the theme of it, but it's got the Christmas
there.
app.
Yeah, it's there.
So probably a little bit more going on the Aventure side of things. That's one of the areas that you're kind of seeing that price difference. Just a lot going on in terms of the features on the Aventure.
Yeah, that definitely is a big differentiating factor.
Yeah, but let's kind of look a little bit more into the performance side of things now in testing.
As far as the programming and speed capabilities, though, we talked about the classes, but so the Aventure gives you 3 pedal assist settings with pretty even steps up in power. It feels really well balanced there.
And then the Alpha is kind of, the power on the speed settings actually kind of clusters together a little bit tight after a while. There's not a ton of differentiation. However, it is like really nice and good engagement, fairly intuitive to use. I'd say overall, the Aventure feels maybe a little bit more natural and has really good power, but I think the, Heybike Alpha holds its own for what it is.
Yeah, definitely. Just being different types of motors, there's just sort of a naturally different feel there that's kind of hard to articulate without experiencing it.
And with the Aventure, you can actually kind of customize and tailor that in their app, which is also really nice and helpful.
For sure. Moving on to the range side of things, in our testing, the Aventure 3 went 35.8 and 60.1 miles.
And the Alpha kind of had a curious result. It was 19.4 miles on the high power test and 79.2, which is actually one of the largest spreads we've seen. So kind of interesting.
On the brake side of things, the Aventure stopped in 21 feet and 6 inches.
The Alpha did really well, stopping in 20 feet 2 inches. And both of those are coming in under the fat bike average. So both are pretty good
100%
in regard to the brakes.
On the hill side of things, so we didn't actually test the Alpha in the throttle, so we'll disregard that. We'll just compare pedal times here. The Aventure finished in 1 minute and 17 seconds in turbo mode.
And then the Alpha did pretty well, doing 1 minute and 19 seconds in its highest level of assist. So again, in terms of just overall hill climbing performance, both are great.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting too, because we typically see mid drives on the slower side of things, but it just kind of goes to show like the differences in power and delivery versus a mid drive.
Well, that and again, 500 watt nominal mid drive motor is very uncommon to see, which definitely kind of helps offset that somewhat, which is why you got a pretty good and respectable hill climb time from it.
Totally. Now, kind of talking a little bit more on the subjective side of things with ride quality, just kind of how it feels to ride. So as far as riding position goes, the Adventure 3 is a slightly sportier feel with just a little bit more of a forward lean to the riding position. That bike also has a suspension seat post, so that just gives you a little bit more of a a smoother ride. And then a lot just comes down to the ACU and the Aventon app. Again, just reiterating what we've said before, where it's very uncommon features on a bike in this price range and just some super top-notch premium security stuff.
For sure. And then over on the Alpha side of things, it's more upright and relaxed. It's almost like a fat tire cruiser in all honesty. So it's got a very relaxed and kind of like more casual feeling nature. A lot of fat bikes, and then Adventure is definitely one of them, have that kind of more like it's in the name, right? Like adventurous edge to it. You can do a little bit more, but again, the Alpha itself, probably more paved riding only is what I would say.
That's a good way to put it, yeah.
Without the overall relaxed nature of it. And then again, it's just, in some ways, it's not as refined as we pointed this out earlier, but the Adventure is the most sold fat tire bike out in America. And so it's definitely had that, onto version 3 now. It's got a little bit more refinement to it. However, like I almost said Adventure again. The Alpha, too many A names.
Yes.
The Alpha definitely kind of like has its own thing, just kind of going back to that laid back, lightweight for a fat tire e-bike nature. So.
Definitely. Kind of boiling all of that down to our recommendations for which bike is best for certain types of riders. The Adventure, we definitely recommend as a bike for those who prefer that sportier feel, maybe who spend a little bit more time off-road, who prefer a little bit more of a natural power delivery and responsiveness to the pedal assist system, and then all just a super high-tech feel, very connected between the app and the ACU there with all the cool security features.
Yeah, and then for the Alpha, it's the type of thing I'd recommend to someone if like you really do want to, go value pricing here. It's the type of bike you could look into. It's very comfortable, very easy, very good mid-drive. Again, the motor experience really was like awesome on that thing. So type of thing you can look into if you don't need all the fancy bells and whistles of the Adventure, but definitely a little bit more on the casual side, I would say. So.
Definitely, and I mean, just price-wise, both price very well for what you get for the bike, and it's just good to see both brands kind of stepping it up, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good examples of that happening.
Anyway, so good comparison there. Good questions all around this week. So again, thank you so much. Keep leaving us comments on the YouTube channel or back at the website, or you can send them to our email at questions@electricbikereport.com.
All right, it's time for
Deals of the Week. Deals of the Week. All right. So there are a few deals this week.
There are,
There's a couple of things going around.
Although, I don't know. On one hand, we kind of should call this clearance of the week.
Clearance of the week.
There's some of that going on, but that's okay.
Yeah, it's part of like spring savings. You gotta get rid of the old stuff. Out with the old, in with the new. So, and for those who prefer the savings of the old generation, which is still good in its own right, there are a few deals going on. So, Ride One Up's got their Gear Up and Spring into Savings promotion. So, $300 off the Prodigy V2, which is one of my short list of personal favorites. It's probably in my top 10. This is the chain drive version is for $2,195 right now, while the belt drive with CVT that we tested is going for $2,595. Just a really good, well-rounded bike with really cool, fun features and tech, especially if you get that CVT belt drive version. It's always fun to ride, in my opinion.
Yeah, that Broza motor is just chef's kiss. And then, we've covered, this is going to be sort of a broad reaching thing. We've just covered a ton of new bikes that have been coming out from Lectric, Aventon, Rad Power Bikes. So those brands kind of have big clearance going on with the previous generation of models. So on Lectric's side, you have the XP 3.0. So the long range version with the upgraded battery is $999. So, great value there if you prioritize range.
And then over on Rad Power Bikes, they got a lot of different models that they're looking to clear out, it looks like. So some of those make sense. You've got like the Rad Expand 5, which is the non-plus version that they have, is discounted. They've also got the Rad Runner 3 Plus. We talked about the new runner, so that makes sense.
Yep.
Even some kind of surprise things in there on clearance. Rad Wagon 4 and then the Rad Rover also on sale. And every one of these bikes somewhere between $200 and $500 off their normal price. So actually some really good stuff there at Rad. So make sure to check out the link down in the video description on that one.
And then on the Aventon side, pretty much everything in their previous generation is on sale. The Adventure, the Level, the Pace, the Abound, the Solterra, and the Cinch. Just,
I want to say they've refreshed the whole model line in the last 12 months. And so anything lingering from last generation seems to be getting that discount going. So definitely go check those ones out too. Yeah,
there's a range of $200 to $300 off there. But that does it for this week's deals.
Again, we can't do any of the show without you guys. So as a thank you for watching, we like to shout out someone from our audience each and every week. John, who do we have this week?
This week we have Rich Stearns, I assume that's short for Richard, 3790. And this was a comment on the Trek FX Plus 7 review. He said, last month I upgraded from a Vancouver, BC e-bike, which was the Surface 604 Shred, to this e-bike in the step-through style. I'm really loving the FX Plus 7S. My old e-bike is a hardtail mountain bike style with lots of power and speed and a throttle, but it's overkill and too heavy for this 77-year-old guy. This bike is 25 pounds lighter than my old one, which is what got me looking at this Trek, but after taking one for a spin at the local Trek dealership, I was so sold on the handling and natural feel, which takes me back to earlier years of pedaling a Cannondale Bad Boy, which I bought 25 years ago and still have. The FX Plus 7S is a great bike. It is expensive, but it's worth every penny because it suits my needs perfectly. So again, as I kind of hinted at earlier, I selected this just because it was a good highlight for someone who's definitely got some experience with a bunch of different bikes. He's been around the block a few times and knows what he likes. Went for the Trek because of its dialed-in feel, and he's loving it. So,
I was gonna say, just
more to say.
Yeah, when you find that bike that is just right for you, it is like, a different feeling. We've had that a couple of times with bikes that we've gotten to test out and stuff. And when you find the one, like, I'm gonna sound like I'm describing like like your relationship, your spouse or something like that. But like when you find the one, it really does just kind of like make a world of difference. So Rich, thank you so much for kind of like dropping that in there and sharing your experience. Really, really cool insight there.
We appreciate you.
All right, wrapping things up here with a final note. Again, we are on the march to 100,000 YouTube subscribers.
It's May, not March.
There's your second dad joke of the episode. But at any rate, we are trying to get to 100,000 subscribers and hoping to do that very soon. So if you are still watching at this point in the video, you are the type who are dedicated and hardcore. We value you greatly. Please share this with friends. Tell them to subscribe. We'd love to get that YouTube button, and you'll help us be a part of that. So thanks in advance.
Hit that like button, make sure you're subscribed, drop us a line down in the comments section. But that does it for this week's episode of The Weekly Recharge.